Right, so today I want to talk to you about this phone and pretty much any other piece of technology that we have today, because they're all basically generated from the same source, and that source is research. If we don't have fundamental research or industrial research to make technology, then we don't have technology, and it's as simple as that. Now, when it comes to technology, this is kind of more or less the driving force behind the US economy and has been for a very long time. If we look at the stock market, people have said we're basically in a recession outside of the AI potentially bubble, which is scary in its own way, but the point from this is that technology is fundamentally important not only to us as Americans as we want to push and innovate and do things that people haven't done before, but also it is essential to the US economy, right? And without research, we don't have that technology, right? This is why whenever I hear that Trump is doing funding cuts to the US research initiative, whatever that might be, I get a little scared. I feel like cutting research is one of the things that will have a long-lasting impact on the US economy, not only today, but also in the long-term future, right? So the other day, there was a quote that was kind of floating around. Republicans have effectively ended medical research in the United States of America, right? Cool. I personally think this is somewhat true, but PolitiFact thinks it's somewhat false, and we have two different opinions as to why this could be the case. So let me talk about this in a bit more depth. See, the PolitiFact article talks about how, well, okay, we still have medical research. It's not like we got rid of it completely. But if you look at the budget cuts for pretty much every area of science that we can think about, we see a 44% cut, a 52% cut, a 40% cut, a 25%, 26% cut, a 55% cut, right? A 55% cut to the NSF is massive, right? We see a 75% cut to chemistry alone, right? So when it comes down to it, like, yeah, okay, maybe we're not cutting science, that much, but because of these cuts in science and the general animosity towards science in the Trump administration, we see that 3/4 of US scientists are considering leaving the country thanks to Doge cuts. This is back in March when Doge actually mattered, but just let that sink in. 3/4 of US scientists leaving means 3/4 of research in the United States is leaving. And like I said before, at least in my opinion, that technological development that is created due to research is one of the primary drivers of the US economy. So I say it again, this is incredibly important. Even if you don't care about research, it is incredibly important. The other thing I want to say is that this funding of research was not a partisan issue before Trump. In fact, during the governmental shutdown of, I think, 2014, it was basically preposterous to claim that one party would defund science in any way, shape, or form, and yet here we are. 2016, Trump ran on defunding certain parts of science, and he did, just a little bit. And this time, he's taking it even further, right? The fact that a single person has basically unilateral control over the amount of funding that goes into this particular portion of the US economy is absolutely crazy. I cannot believe we live in a world where a single person and a single person's ideology has become so pervasive that we are actively destroying our own country simply because we don't understand what's happening. Now, keep in mind that historically, the US has been one of, if not the #1 funder of science worldwide. This is why there is a brain drain to the United States, why all the other countries, the best and brightest for all the other countries, kind of sort of want to come here. And the reason they want to come here is because we have funding. Not only do we have funding, we fundamentally have celebrated research in our past. NASA is a national treasure and has been for a very long time. Internationally, it is known as one of the greatest scientific achievements in mankind, even. Like, you see people wearing NASA shirts and MIT shirts and Harvard shirts here, and I live in Barcelona right now. It's crazy the amount of impact that the US Science Initiative has had, not only nationally, but also worldwide. And of course, we as Americans only care about Americans, but it is fundamentally important that we maintain our ability to fund fundamental research and attract the best and brightest from around the world. Now, let's take a step back and talk about this quote. Republicans have effectively ended medical research in the United States of America. Like I said before, this particular article talks mainly about funding. They say, hey, technically there is still funding available. He just cut maybe half of it in certain areas, right? Okay, fair enough, but they're missing the bigger picture. Right? Not only have we lost some amount of our funding, but we have now lost a bunch of momentum. There is no longer going to be a brain drain to the United States. We're no longer going to get the best and brightest. And if we don't get the best and brightest, well, what we're left with might not be good enough to sustain the technological development that we expect for the United States of America. Now, look, there are a whole bunch of things I feel the Trump administration is doing wrong. Not only morally wrong, but also logistically wrong. I feel like they're prioritizing things that I personally do not feel they should prioritize. Now, let's take a step back and talk about things that will have long-lasting impact. And when I think about things that will have long-lasting impact on the United States economy, it is this, the defunding of science. That, to me, is one of the biggest things, right? I know there's a whole bunch of other things, and I don't really want to talk about them right now, but for the most part, I do genuinely believe that this is a huge deal that basically nobody is talking about. And if I'm the guy that has to make a stupid video to get people to listen, maybe that's what I'll do. That's why the video exists. Also, I'm putting this out on the No Kings protest day, which is poised to be one of the biggest protests in modern American history. I don't know how true that'll be because obviously I'm recording this video beforehand, but what I will say is the following, right? This is an area where Trump's unilateral control over funding that he should not have access to will genuinely cause harm to the US in the long term. Now, I personally believe it's incredibly impactful. We can argue about how impactful that will be, but the fact is that it will impact people and it will have a lasting effect. Long story short, you shouldn't scare away scientists. So I currently live in Barcelona and I can't attend the protests myself. So if you were able to go out and peacefully protest, please do so. Obviously, no violence. I'm not condoning violence in any way. I'm just saying that very clearly, I believe, and I feel many other people believe as well, that the Trump administration has massively overreached in areas where they really should not have any power. And this is one of many different ways in which Trump is actively harming the United States of America. That is it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.